All right, everybody, we'll kick off. Ngā mihi nui, kia koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki tēnā hui. Welcome to the meeting. It's good to have some guests here today, the auditors, so we'll speak more of that in the appropriate time. So I'll just open by calling for apologies. We have one, which is Annalisa Elstob. No others. I can call someone to move that. Nicole and Shane, all in favour? Against, carried. David, matters under investigation. There were a couple there. One's due in August. The other was the report back in SAC, and I think we'll get a verbal there, and we'll work through that, the outcome of that by the end of the month, so that we meet our time frames. Confirmation of minutes on page. I haven't got it there, page 4, I think it is. Can I have someone move? Sam and Bob. Are there any matters arising out of those or alterations to those minutes?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just a note from Annalisa. She says, and I'm reading from an email that she sent to me, as I will through the meeting, she's raised a number of issues. So a comment with respect to the minutes at the Aquatic Centre. She said last month I requested confirmation from management that they've worked with the head contractor to understand how health, safety and wellbeing and quality have been considered and managed in an accelerated work program. She says I'm more focused on the process. For example, as soon as the head contractor says accelerated work program, we as a principal have a process to gain positive assurance that the increased risk is being adequately managed. That will be reported back, Mr. Chair, in the Craig Robinson report next month.
Thank you, David, and we'll convey that back to Annalisa as well, via through these minutes or in person with the other questions. It'll be a good process. Okay, so we've got the minutes. If there's no further questions, we've got the minutes moved and seconded. All in favour? My microphone not working again. Obviously, we had no tour this morning. We cancelled that. It was tour of recently completed facilities, and in light consultation of the Chief Executive, in light of the fact that we've actually opened a couple of those or had roof shouts for those recently, we thought it was probably not worth doing that at this stage, and we're probably to speak louder, Stephen, I think this microphone's. With that said, I had as one of the project champions for SAC, got a tour through there with James earlier last week, and great progress here, and it's good to see that going forward. Also this morning we've got the report on the LTP, so welcome, gentlemen. Great to see another modified report to Council. I think it's a great success for staff and everyone involved, and thanks for the effort that's gone into that. David, I know you'll speak to that more later. Just again, there's more interesting comment and future work to do around, and we mention it every time, Three Waters local government reform and RMA reform. And Sam, I know you'll be bringing some stuff back to us this afternoon as well, and maybe some comments around other issues that you've around all of those topics. Just on the other perennial topic that we have here is training, just to let everyone know that they probably do know that I attended the week-long course in Taupo week before last, and just reiterate the value of that course. Absolutely fantastic. I was perhaps probably a little hesitant about attending that, and I probably procrastinated before, but the value of that course is absolutely fantastic, and I'd recommend anyone when you get the opportunity to take that. So I'll present that as my verbal report for this morning and move in that direction. Shane, if you second. Thank you. All in favour? Right. Against and carried. David, we go through the manager report, page 14.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. The key item on the agenda, on the report, should I say, this morning, is the adoption of the Psychon Statement of Intent. We discussed this at our last meeting. I was requested to go and talk to the CE and board chair with respect to some changes to make easier consideration this morning. Mr. Chair, I've left those amendments in red. So if we turn to page 19 of the agenda, one of our questions was around board composition. In red, you'll note the addition of the comments acknowledging current board consists of 4 members and noted with the opportunities currently existing in the market, a review of its composition will take place to ensure these opportunities are maximised. So I'm comfortable with that. Key one, Mr. Chair, over the next page, dividend distribution, you'll recall the figure was $800,000 or 50% of surplus. We requested that be elevated to reflect really where the company's performance was proposed to go in the financial projections. So again, very comfortable with the $1.2 million. Page 23 of the agenda under strategic direction, some minor wording changes, but more importantly, if you flip the page, that was around some of the sustainability initiatives that we requested, and there's reference there to greenhouse gas emissions, electric vehicles, and also planting opportunities. And finally, community engagement was recognition of local iwi and runanga in our conversation. So, Mr. Chair, from a management perspective, we are comfortable that those changes reflect what the subcommittee had requested, and thus the recommendation be that the Psychon SOI be adopted for the 3 years commencing 1st of July 2021. We will make some comments on the Aquatic Centre review in PX, albeit acknowledging that the report was received late yesterday and staff are still having a look through the draft of that report. Snapsea and Solve I have updated, and interestingly, what I can tell you is that as we continue to promote Snapsea and Solve, so the numbers using that facility are increasing quite a lot. Through the calendar year through December 2020, the biggest number we received in a month was 160, but the average was nearer around 120. Happy to report that the 3 months this year have been 167, 215 and 202, so that's working well. Our staff are also engaged actively in the developers of that system, and as I've said, enhancements are scheduled to be completed by the end of May, but we have put some manual things in place to prompt callbacks. Our draft long-term plan, councillors, you will have received already the first of the booklets for the submissions, so 628 submissions received. Last year, to put that in perspective, we had about 220 was agreed, 230, somewhere around there. Thank you. And 88 speakers over 2 days, so it will be 2 hard long days. So we've got Thursday, Friday next week, and then deliberations. So key thing is to make sure we hear and understand the issues being raised by the respective submitters, but more importantly, going forward to Thursday the 20th, and if needed, subsequent dates that we understand and address all of the issues. And agendas for the 20th will be circulated Wednesday or Thursday of next week at the latest, so that will include staff comments. And just a note about risk management report and the time frame for that. So, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions on aspects of the management report for the month.
Thank you, David. Do you want to run through Annalisa's comments on that first?
Yeah, it was. She was talking about submissions. So how did that compare? So we've talked about the number, and also a question: would it likely lead to any material changes? And obviously that will be the outcome from our deliberations on the 20th of May. Will be the answer to that question.
Sam, sorry, David. Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Just focusing on the statement of intent. Good to see the our requests included within that, and he's just reading between the lines of the board structure piece. The feedback would be that they're looking for a fifth person to fit in there. It's not explicit within the document, but just so that everyone's aware, those have been the discussions at executive level and board level, Murray, we've had with them. Even though it's not right here.
No, thanks, Sam. You're right. That is reflected there. Shane.
Tēnā tātou. I also just wanted to commend the updated statement of intent with Psychon as well, and also thank Sam for asking of the board to look at a cultural journey, including the Runganga and the iwi. So it's a great step forward. I just have one question around snaps and solved, and it says that we're looking at enhancing that, and I just wonder what the specific enhancements are for snaps and solved.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So this is the conversation that we've had a couple of meetings back around the follow-up loop. So the system coming into the organisation is good. The question mark is, are we 100% confident that we're doing 360 degrees? So receiving, answering, but then it's the contact back to the initial inquiry. We also need to acknowledge, though, Shane, that there are a number of instances where it's not possible to do what's requested, and just making sure that we're covering off on those instances as well.
Yeah, thanks, David. And just, I guess the future discussion will be, although we've got an updated and increased dividend, Sam, it was raised last meeting about how we target the use of those funds, and there'll be a discussion for full council, not just audit and risk. So I look forward to those discussions. We've got a recommendation there that we receive the manager's report for information, and that the Psychon statement of intent for the 3 years commencing 1 July 2021 is adopted. I guess that's adopted for recommendation through to full council. So that in mind, is that moved by you, Nicole?
Yeah.
Thank you. And Bob, second. Thank you. All in favour? Against and carried. We now move on to Audit New Zealand report on their LTP. Greg, no, it's not going to be Greg. It's got Greg on the sheet. It's going to be Kelvin. You're going to tag. Would you like to tag team, gentlemen? Kelvin. Okay.
Just while Kelvin's coming to the top table, with respect to SOIs, we now only have one outstanding SOI, which is the Central Plains Water Trust. Councillors Mugford and Lemon and I met with our counterparts from Christchurch City last week. We discussed, we've sent back a request for some minor amendments. We intend to have that SOI on the agenda for the next audit and risk meeting, and then we'll just bundle the whole 5 of them up in the June council meeting.
Good morning, everyone. So LTP and Audit New Zealand review of the consultation document that was completed on the 17th of March this year, which came back with a nice, clean report. The process with Audit New Zealand went really well. I think it was an outstanding result. The next step in this process will, of course, be the final audit of the long-term plan itself. Included in the report, which is attached, which I won't go through, there's some recommendations for improvement. We've taken those on board, and we've made comments in the report, and they'll be actioned in due course. If you have any questions on that, Julian is in the room at the moment and be happy to answer any questions. Or Julian, have you got any comments you want to make?
Julian, I know we discussed earlier. I just wonder if you do pop up to the top table and perhaps just introduce your colleague as well. It's an opportunity for the rest of the, I was remiss on that before. So if you'd like to do that, it'd be good to, for Uma to meet the rest of the team here and vice versa. Sorry, Julian, I should have thought of that previously.
Good morning, councillors. It's a pleasure to introduce Uma to you. Uma is the audit manager now, taking over from Sam, and we have made a deliberate decision to have the same audit manager for the entire Psychon and council group. So it's the same person, and it will make our audit even better than previously. And Uma came to us after spending many years with KPMG internationally and in Auckland. So Umar is pretty experienced in auditing commercial entities such as yourselves and the group.
Thanks, Julian. Question, Sam, did you have a question?
Thank you, and great to receive this report. Probably similar time to this last year, well, a few months after. There was a lot of discussion around time pressure to be able to finalise documentation and do audits, particularly the end of year audits. How have things played out over the last 6 months? Were you able to meet deadlines, and did it get better or worse than expected? And how do you see the rest of this year playing out as we finish off our final LTP and also thinking about our annual report?
It's an interesting question, and we are still looking at continuing with the priority framework, so that we are working towards achieving statutory reporting deadlines rather than the desired timetable that individual clients might have. So I think that's what we're trying to achieve this year, and insofar as I could tell, for Selwyn and Psychon, we will be able to achieve the statutory reporting deadline. So on a wider basis, a bit difficult to say. You need a crystal ball, made in China perhaps, to accurately predict what's going to happen. But it's tough. We have recruitment issues in common with other firms. With the borders closed, people can't travel. So there's a plus in a way, because we've got people who are ready to embark on the OE, but can't go. But conversely, we've got people who we've offered contracts but couldn't come. So it's challenging.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. I'm not sure if we've got a crystal ball, but we are very transparent, so that must help. Yeah. Best you're going to get from me today. Shane. It was Deborah. Sorry, yeah, I didn't see the order. Deborah.
Oh, thank you. My question is around, I guess, the request for information and comments, and on my agenda it is circulating around page 34. It's to do with asset management practices, section 2.3.
Asset management practices.
Yes.
Yes.
We seem to have some confusion. This is one question. When we're talking about 3 waters reform, but we're talking about asset management plans in 5 waters.
Yeah, there's council's description of the 3 waters, because they split. Your irrigation, for example, is 1 water. So there's 5. It's not that we couldn't add, but that's how you describe it.
Okay. Now the other is with regards to the development of asset management plans, right? Did you look at what prior consultation had been taken place in the development of these asset management plans with any other third parties or subcommittees of council? Did you investigate or look at how they're put together?
I'm not sure if I got your question right. The asset management plans were looked at by our colleagues from Wellington. Their backgrounds in this kind of stuff, engineering background. So they look at this practices and plans for us, and provided the audit team with the findings and conclusions drawn to guide us then in linking with the financial strategy. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. The reason why I asked that question is that quite often local knowledge is able to fill in gaps when it comes to asset management plans, because of their involvement of working alongside council.
Yes.
And I just wondered, was there any consultation that took place with those committees to bring a collective
I see.
information to
Right.
the asset management
Sure.
plan. And staff changes happen over a long time, but quite often people who are on these committees have been there forever and a day, and their local knowledge is, is really valuable.
Yeah, we engage with with management charged with asset management planning in council. We didn't talk to your subcommittees or of council.
Okay. Thank you. And that's fine.
Thanks, Deborah. Shane.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koe e auma, lau mai hara mai. My question is around section number 3, key risks and issues,
Yes.
3.1. In your summation, you've brought up in the previous LTP that council's annual capital program was considered too ambitious and therefore not able to be delivered. That seems to be a very high risk and one that's been discussed on a number of occasions in this week. I'm just wanting to know, are you comfortable with discussions held with staff that we are considering that? Obviously, it's going to be brought back at a later stage, but what do you see as the key risks moving forward and or timeframes that it needs to be completed by? And what is the end game if we don't, if we fail to meet that?
Okay. Well, some parts of your question might best be answered by management, but from the auditor's perspective, we look at the processes the council has taken to get assurance, providing that assurance to you, to the governing body, around council's ability to deliver on the capital expenditure plan. And the risk, of course, I think I might have explained previously in an earlier meeting, is that if your capital expenditure program is not realistic, you're basically using that to set rates that you're not going to. There's this disconnect between your rate setting and your information set up in your proposed budget. That's what you're saying. So we look at the evidence and from discussion with your people, and form a view that the doability of your program is reasonable. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee. So we look at other things such as industry capacity, your own internal capacity and capability to prepare. There's a long lead time. Even preparing tender documents, for example, take a long time. Evaluating a tender take a long time. So those are the things that we look at to form that view.
We've got a next item on the agenda is Treasury Report, which speaks directly to that, Julian, of course. Interestingly, there was an article on Stuff, I think a couple of days ago, from Standard & Poor's talking about council expenditure and borrowing, and that the credit rating will now not just be around your borrowings and your ability to service that, but also around your delivery of infrastructure. I thought that was quite an interesting change in tactic, that the fact that you've got high debt levels is not the only consideration. It's whether you've delivered infrastructure in a timely and appropriate manner. So they're not saying that debt is necessarily a bad thing if it's been well used and has achieved the outcome. And I guess that's part of your audit process, just to see that those expenditures are in line as well. So I just thought it was an interesting comment and make that point. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Julian, can you just confirm this is an absent member request that the emphasis of matter comment on Three Waters is stock standard for all audit reports this year?
Yes. Regional councils might be the exception, but all others, and rightly so.
Thank you. If there be no further questions, we've got a recommendation there that we receive the Audit New Zealand report, and moved Sam and seconded Nicole. All in favour? Against? Carried.
So just in closing, thank you very much again, especially to Greg and his team. We received full cooperation in completing our work. So that really helped us achieve a good result. So there are matters we don't agree with, but that didn't impede us in getting our job done and done on time. So quite looking forward to the next stage, and your engagement with the community must have been a tremendous success given the humongous amount of submissions you received. So happy reading.
You're right. You want to tag team on that reading, Julian? It's quite substantial, but no, you're right. Thank you very much for your input today, and we look forward to seeing you in due course. Thank you, gentlemen. We move to next report. Kelvin, you're going to start the table. Treasury Report, page 43.
Thank you. We'll move to page 45 of the report, and I'll just run through some of the highlights of the report. From here, you can see that our debt levels remain unchanged. Cash and deposits down slightly, just as we climb into those, but there's still substantial amounts there. Cost of debt coming down as some of the older fixed interest rates are rolling off. Moving to the next page, Cashflow Forecast. Again, we're using a best estimate at this point, and we're going through our annual carry forward process at the moment, which goes to some of this delivery of the capital plan. The estimate that's in there currently is around 40 million. This could range 40 to 45, just after some other numbers I looked at yesterday. I think the key point here on carry forwards to think about also is isolating your capital program into 1 year can be a little bit dangerous in the way of thinking, and looking at it over more of a longer term, as Julian had mentioned, things do change as we go along. Tendering can take further time. There can be delays in projects and so on. So, and some of the disciplines around how we budget, a tendency to put the whole project into year one when we know it may spread across 2 years. So a little bit more discipline, and that is what we're introducing to sort of tidy that up, which will bring those the doability for a bit of term over that program to be more in line with what's in the budget. Moving forward to the next page, debt position, we've really covered that off given we've drawn down no further debt. It remains unchanged. Interest rate risk management, you'll note we've got two interest rate risk management curves sitting in there this time. The graph to the right is illustrating if and when the LTP is adopted, and if it was adopted in the way we've taken it to consultation, that is what the risk graph will look like. At the point in time that's adopted, we will need to go out and undertake some hedging to put us inside policy limits. The approach I've taken there is, given it's not agreed, not certain, it'll be preempting the position we're in. And in the near term, we don't have a significant issue around hedging, and with the low market rates at the moment, we're in a good position. Moving forward, cash investments, nothing to see there. It's really unchanged from where we were previously, and everything's within policy. Debtors, just one point to note on the very bottom left table is an additional row in there for 2021, so that can be ignored. But if we do start with that table, as a percentage of debt outstanding to total rates, that percentage has been falling, which has been pleasing. Moving further up, you can see the position March last year to March this year, just about identical. So again, reasonably pleasing in the environment we're in. Our other debtors, environmental services, water and other, they are rising somewhat, trending up from the last quarter. And there's some work underway on making sure that they're in a reasonable state, especially in the water space. But the environmental services stuff, that can vary where you have, and I think we touched upon this last week when we were talking about this subject in the workshop, that depending on when consents are issued, will determine when some of these debts come in, because the invoice will be issued earlier to say, yes, you have a development contribution to pay, and then that'll come in after we issue that consent a little bit later. Not too much to concern there at all. And then finally, there's a couple of market interest rate data trends there. We can start to see that. So it is tightening up a little bit at the bottom, but when you look at that long run averages, it's in pretty good shape. And the core New Zealand economic indicators, which a little bit of a tick down on some of those, but generally trending up, and the economy is doing reasonably well. So I'll take any questions on that report.
Kelvin, I just one there's a commentary on page 50 of total to mortgage 122. I'm assuming that's total that have been recovered by having them applied to their mortgage. Is that correct? Yes.
That's correct.
David, you want to make a comment there?
Yes, I do. Again, on behalf of Annalisa, acknowledging the good commentary and clarity of the content of the report. She says, my only comment is confirming the thought process that's been undertaken for capital projects in relation to the supply chain. So that is something that staff are very mindful of and heavily engaged in conversations with all head contractors, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, David. Deborah.
Look, I have one question. It's on page 50 and it's in regards to debtors, and it's the environmental services debtors. And could I have an explanation as to whether it's an upward trend? How do we actually get it to a downward trend? Is there a policy? Is there a means of actually getting the environmental services debt down?
Well, given the environment at the moment, with consenting driving up higher, more likely that will continue to trend up, and that's just a trend of the number of consents going through. Therefore, we bring more revenue in, and the debt level will increase. Overall debt level, we are really focused on that longer term debt, and that's just a matter of managing that down. And as I said before, sometimes a little bit of timing around resource consents being issued and elements like that create that issue.
Sam.
Yeah, good question, probably similar to yours, Murray. On page 50, the total COVID extensions, it's 32 people that have applied or we've accepted as having an extension for a total of $7,000. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So it's really good from a community perspective around the numbers that have needed to do something. But I think last year was the right response for us as a council, but to know that it actually hasn't been called on as an encouraging sign for our community. So good to have that reporting here, thank you. And really like the coloured graph, which just shows the quantums associated with each of the areas where the debt is sourced from, because that really shows when we're talking about it, it's not just people not paying their rates, which is an easy thing for people if they just hear a commentary to think we've got people that have not paid bills, or there's huge numbers of reasons for them, and the big blue boxes really show that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I concur with that. It's very readable, Kelvin. It makes it very easy to digest and to formulate questions out of that. Yeah, again, we're in a fortunate position, Sam, aren't we, as a community, in that we're so vibrant. We're ahead of the trends as far as unemployment and deprivation. It's not to say that there aren't issues here, but we obviously that's reflected in our figures here, and that's pleasing to see. There being no further questions, Bob, sorry.
Just thank you very much. It's actually really good to see it clear and separated like that. Makes it a lot easier to understand where we're going, because in the past it's been quite difficult to actually understand what proportions they were. So I think this is great. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. Sorry, I didn't see your name up on there. We have a mover and a second, please, that we receive for information. Deborah and Sam, all in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We move on to the next report, which is the monthly financials. Kelvin, you're back there again.
Thank you. We'll move to page 54 and just run through the highlights. Really, one of the things when you're reporting, not much changes in a month. And we're in a similar trend to where we were in the previous months. Operating surplus is running 4 million better than plan, and the growth elements within our organisation is driving that. So that's the consenting and really the growth in numbers. Just out of interest in terms of that, within my space, within the rating area, we've already got change of property ownership. With 2 months to run in this financial year, we're already 700 notices higher than last year. We'll probably get pretty close to the 1,000 higher. So that's just showing that there is a lot of activity in the market. Capital expenditure, 80 million to date, and that's 20 lower than the annual plan. COVID impacts have really now largely gone. And then again, on growth, we can see there the large number of consents that are being applied for and issued. And we still are having time frame issues, but that 54% is up from where we were last month. So it is starting to trend in a better way, and there's still plenty of effort going in Tim's space around recruitment of consenting officers and new approaches to attracting consenting officers, which has been great. I won't go through the page by page, but I'm happy to take questions.
I think that the community's expectations around building consents or any consenting is understood in the community, although that doesn't take the frustration that many people are feeling. But to see that 54% of consents are issued within time frame, it's pleasing to see that we're still under 10 out there. Because that goes around cabinet at the moment, it's about 25% behind where we're looking. What we thought we
There will always be a pickup at the end of the year. It's just the way that financials turn out and everyone loads the costs in. But there will be, as I said before, the carry forwards are likely to be 40 to 45. So you can read that into the number of what the variance will be at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I had that similar question, so good I held off. I guess the follow-on to that commentary around building compliance is just that I know we've got our reassessment for attaining our licence to operate as building authority. So perhaps future meetings, David, we just need to have some conversations around what that risk is to us, and maybe that's a risk that we bring to the perhaps next meeting, Kelvin. Is a matter under investigation. If that's David, you can make a comment.
Yeah, look, I can make some comments for councillor information. We have been meeting with a number of the major players, just bringing them up to speed with where the issues are at the moment. One of the things we start off by reminding everybody is that our average monthly building consents over the past 12 months have been around 250. Our last month was 380. And that's a trend which is likely to continue. We are in overdrive in terms of recruiting, but the cupboard is bare. This is an issue that is not unique to Selwyn. It's right across the whole country, but certainly in Canterbury. There's a couple of initiatives. The first one, which at the next council briefing session, staff will bring everybody up to speed with a fast-track consent processing model that we're going to be rolling out. Tonight, we have 50 plus people from the sector coming to a session 5 through 7 o'clock in our cafeteria, where we're going to be addressing a number of capacity issues and processing issues, etc. And finally, the Canterbury councils have commenced an initiative of collaboration where we can actually talk about pooling our resources in a whole lot of ways. I've been chairing that group. We had our first meeting 10 days ago, second one scheduled in a couple of weeks' time with a report back to Canterbury Chief Executives with directional initiatives on the 25th of June.
Thanks, David. I guess the commentary here is about understanding what our risk is going forward, and I think that's still pertinent. We understand there's a lot of initiative there, but we just need to, obviously the loss of being accredited as a building control authority is quite a major for us, in line with our fast growth, and obviously it brings in substantial revenue to our predictions as well. So yeah, I think we should see something report on that at some stage in the near future.
We've got that as one of their key risks, and I suggest we'll bring that forward as the risk subject for next month.
I think might be timely, Kelvin, if we call that our key risk for next meeting. Just a couple of things there. They're really just clarification, I guess. Also noted there, I think it's the first time I can remember seeing OPEX expenditure ahead of our budget. It's only marginal, but that can mean one or two things, I guess. But it's good to see them largely aligning, I guess, is really the commentary. The overspend on the wastewater, I'm assuming, is the advancing of the pines. Kelvin, that's the figure on page 58. We just look at the table there. Where
yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's in line with the increased capacity required. And then page 67, there was just a commentary there on the DPR budget tracking in line. I'm assuming that was tracking in line with the revised budget that we approved some time ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you. Look, just in regards to our growth capacity and our infrastructure capacity, why we're looking at greenfield development and we are getting a lot of new infrastructure, what is our plan for looking at our existing infrastructure in our older parts of our towns? Are we actually programming a support package or a renewal package for those pieces of infrastructure, or are we just concentrating on the new growth development or greenfield development?
No, it's good question. It's part of our infrastructure and asset management planning that all our assets are considered for condition and life, and renewal programs are put in place for those. So the renewal budgets, we're heading, I think we're running slightly behind on the renewals for this year, but not significantly. There may be a slight bit of carry forward into them, but Murray's team have that factored into their plans. Murray might want to comment.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, actually. We've obviously have long-term asset management plans and infrastructure boundaries, and what we've seen in the last 6 months is a number of private plan changes that are actually testing us because they're requiring infrastructure outside of our boundaries. In respect of that, though, for wastewater and water, we're actually in a reasonably good position given the capacity of the pines and our long-term planning around that. In terms of water, we basically hold our own, particularly because of our demand management strategies and in looking at non-engineering ways of reducing demand. Roading networks are relatively elastic. They can take more load. The roading network. So we're in a reasonably good position, but we're probably better than most to being able to react to that sort of road pressure. But that's something that the commissioners will have to weigh up in each of the considerations of each of the private plan changes as to whether it's reasonable and achievable to service these properties, these subdivision. However, the applicant has to prove that they can be serviced. But overall, we're in a relatively good position, but it will accelerate our infrastructure demand, particularly in the wastewater area.
Thanks for the clarification, Harry. It was just a question there from Annalisa about the challenges we face regarding capital program, which we've discussed, Kelvin, but also ongoing issues with supply chain. But we've got that covered, and I will leave that until major projects, I think. If there are no further questions, we've got a recommendation that we receive the financial report for that period for information. Mover, Sam and Shane, All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Kelvin. I think that's your bit for a while. And welcome, James and Denise. Do you both want to come up to the front? Or? So, page 93, Community Pools Summer Season Summary.
Good morning, everyone. Look, it's a bit of a nicer report than previous years this time. I think we're starting to reap the rewards of some of our hard work over the past 2 or 3 seasons. And we've gone from sort of 20 or 22 corrective actions down to only a handful. So we are starting to see some real progress here, which is nice. Just a quick summary of what's in there. Look, overall, it was a really good season. We are seeing some reporting coming through, but I would see that as a good sign that the reporting of incidents is coming through rather than, the previous perhaps 10 years of Southbridge having 2 reported incidents only. So I think it's really good that we're starting to see that stuff come through. Out of Melbourne, at Darfield Pool, we've seen a swim school take up some lane space out there. They submitted a health and safety plan and went through an induction process that was really well received by the community, and we think that's going to continue in a private capacity for Melbourne Swim School, but also we'll see Selwyn District Council start to offer some lessons out there as well. Likewise, the aqua size classes were delivered by a trained local instructor as well. Really like that. Darfield and Southbridge achieved pool safety, which is really good. There was no major issues with that. Sorry, mic's other than the fact that due to COVID, we had to do it after the pools are closed, so it made staff interviews a bit problematic. A local assessor came and interviewed some staff at SAC as part of that, but there was no major or even really minor remedial actions to be taken as part of that audit. Leased in Kalinchi pools, testing regularly and generally very accurately. Lots of the issues there were just around the way that the information was recorded rather than the actual testing being done, which was really good, and they've been really receptive of going back and correcting that. Also, the electronic keys at Leaston were working really well, so that's something where we didn't know how well that was going to go, but it seems to be relatively successful, and quite a good model moving forward, potentially for Kalinchi. The wristbands, as mentioned in there, is one of the considerations, is an interesting one, and it's something that we did have a lot of internal communication about, not only with the operations team and the land swim team at Selwyn Aquatic Centre, but also with other councils. So I met with Waimak and Christchurch City and Ashburton as well around how this is going to roll. I suppose some of the concerns were the wristband is not going to save a child's life, and it's always up to the lifeguard to identify the child, regardless of whether they're wearing a wristband or not. But with that said, we didn't want to ignore WorkSafe's recommendation. We didn't want to ignore Recreation Aotearoa's recommendation as well. So we've gone ahead and put that in place at Selwyn Aquatic Centre. We're going to monitor it month by month, term by term, and see how it goes. And we'll come back to you with a review of how that's looking in a couple of terms' time, just to see if it is effective or it's creating more work. That's because that was another consideration. Are lifeguards now becoming wristband police rather than actually watching children? So I don't think it's a perfect solution, but we'll see how it goes and come back. Happy to take any questions.
Bob?
Yeah, just with the Darfield pool, I see there was 6 health and safety incidents. You said they're minor. Did we have to do anything to rectify any of them, or they were just accidents?
Generally slip strips. There was two rescues as part of that. Both were from poolside though, so no one got in to do the rescue. So relatively minor. Yeah.
Sam? Yeah, good to have the report for the season. I just, my own experience in needing lessons for kids would support you putting in some extra lesson capacity in the in the Melbourne area. Elliot now comes over here to Rolleston because there wasn't space to be doing stuff in Darfield, and there are other families that do the same, and their preference would have been to stay local if we could have, but yeah, that availability wasn't there, so looking forward to that being provided next season. Thank you.
Yeah, David.
James, in response to a question from Annalisa, who's not with us today, can you just talk about the process for identifying health and safety incidents in those pools where there's just access card only?
Yeah, sure. So the incident that was reported at Leaston Pool, for example, was reported by staff. So that was cloudy water due to inadequate circulation or something going wrong for the pool water testing. Generally, though, what happens is at RBE, when they get their key, they get an induction book and they get inducted by, or supposedly get inducted by a committee member. On that form is a list of incidents that could occur. So they could be slips, trips, falls, rescue incidents, facility maintenance issues, and there's a phone number to call. That comes through the customer service team here and then gets logged with myself or Marcel. That or the committee deals with it at the time. So those are the two ways.
Yeah, thanks, James. Another fantastic report and great to see the progress here. And once again, I'm sure if you are thanks to you and Sandrine for the week 2 or 3 SAC the other day. Much appreciated and great to see the progress. I guess the commentary there is around, and you made note of that maybe breaking that electronic key system out and glitching would be a good idea, and I'd endorse that. I think that's a fantastic idea, because one of the issues we always have there is knowing how many people use it. And, you may or may not, get everything recorded. We know that's always been an issue. So, yeah, thank you again for the report. And if there's no further questions, we've got 2 recommendations there, A and B. We get a mover there, Bob and Nicole. For that, all in favour? Against and carried. Yes, you certainly can, Sam.
Just process for this report. Will now sit on the council agenda for information. I'm just saying there's a lot of information here that people don't necessarily find in the audit and risk agenda. So not for decision making because we haven't really made a decision, but for profile.
Look, I think, it's been received and it's on a public agenda. I think just circulate for information rather than include on an agenda, because that will be having the same debate twice. And it's more about the corrective actions that are in recommendation B that we need to focus on and report back to those under the Audit and Risk Committee health and safety responsibilities.
I guess you set the agendas for those meetings, so I guess the ball's in your court. That's the only commentary I'll make from the chair. Thanks, James. I think that's us. Thank you very much. And Kelvin, major projects update, please. Page 100.
Thank you. We'll turn to 102, which is Selwyn Sports Centre. Successfully opened on Sunday, so the project is all but there, complete. There's a little bit of final project tidy up stuff to go on here, but we're forecasting a potential overspend of 0.14 of a million, which is 0.6%. So that's very successful, but the design build project helps keep within that budget. In upcoming months, we will do a project closeout on this and a bit of a review of what went well and what could be lessons learned to be taken forward. Moving forward to Selwyn Aquatic Centre, so the report back from the engineers we've heard about earlier today, where if not available now, but will be very soon, changing facilities back open. We're looking here at a potential overrun on this project of about 0.4. Now, just a word of caution here, we're now starting to get into the existing pool, and as found condition as all these things are, you don't know until you start to lift the lid on some of these things what you may find. So just a word of caution there that we've taken an estimate on what we think the contingency amount should be, and we'll just need to wait and see. Tiara. Again, we've taken a conservative position in the fit out and construction costs to be running over by 0.7 million, and we're favourable with amounts on land costs there, so that'll take the project to be 0.5 million over budget over a 23.22 million project, which is a $22.7 million project, which is a pretty good position to be in. Things are tracking to plan there. The redesign of the fixtures for the facade has been completed, and if you've driven past, you'll see that they're going up at pace. The health hub completion there now, and we're looking to fit out for tenancy, and we've recognised a forecast cost there for new tenants. This is not the CDHB, but other potential GPs. At 1.35 million as a contingency for that. As and when we start to run through those designs, we'll start to firm that up. Lincoln Reservoir and Pump Station, my copy here has got something missing on the top left hand corner, and I'm assuming you're all the same, so it's just a transfer and formatting thing from the PDF. We'll just make sure that's correct, but that's just the standard information that sits on the report around around what it is. Not much to report here. It's a fairly stable position from where it was last month. Pines, a couple of things here. Contingency is going to exceed by 390,000. We've discussed previously the 295, which is around the power supply. There's a further piece here around 146, which was conveyor system, and why that is there, it's been upgraded to something that's larger that can handle 3 times what was originally designed for a significantly cheaper price in an overall position. So probably an investment brought forward at an appropriate time to deal with future increases in volume. Rolleston Drive and Markham Way completed well under budget and within time and cost. And then the other projects, which are largely related to the town centre and the not just in the near term on this is to put a lot more detail in behind this, so we can get a lot more, and we're getting a lot more progress going, and start to really tease this one out a little bit more. We take questions.
Nicole.
The Pinesville Drying Hall, just to close the loop. So I'm assuming that the new power supply is needed because we have got a much larger conveyor, or is there some other reason? So I question why that hasn't been budgeted for.
They're not related. This was all about designing for that future demand and bringing forward expenditure. So the electricity supply was bringing forward expenditure from the next phases. The conveyor was when they looked at the pricing for a conveyor which would be 3 times smaller and one that's 3 times larger, the economics said go for the larger one.
Kelvin, I just had one here from Annalisa and Tara Atia. The 710 uplift and fit out is significant. The wording scope increase. Just asking for clarity on that. I know we've spoken about it before, but perhaps if you just reiterate what that is, because I know we've talked about that previously, but perhaps just for the sake of the meeting. It's a combination of construction and fit out. It's not predominantly fit out. So we'll just monitor that and we'll bring forward a bit more analysis. But we do generally take a conservative position on that rather than underdo it and have to come back later with something that's a surprise.
I have a question.
Deborah.
Tiara Atia, a redesign of the fittings for the facade have been completed. Who's paying for that redesign of those fixing costs? Are they an architectural Are they a design feature? Are they because we changed our mind and we need to actually use our contingency? What does it relate to?
Look, I have to get some more detail on that, but from my understanding, there was timing differences between the installer and the designer in terms of getting the design actually correct and the process correct. I don't think it's substantial cost, but I'll come back and confirm that.
If no further questions, we've got a recommendation that we receive the major financial projects report, contract performance for information. So we'll give a mover for that. Sam and Nicole. All in favour? Aye. Against and carried. That brings us to the end of the public portion of this meeting. If we have someone move us into PX, Bob and Deborah. All in favour? Against, carried. Thank you for those who have attended via streaming, and we'll just have a short break for a cup of tea. We're a wee bit